What's going on, guys? Welcome to part 3 of our lyric finder application. So in the last video we took care of the lyrics page. So if we click on view lyrics, it should send out a request to the Musixmatch API and send us back somewhat of the lyrics, not the whole thing because it's just the free account, but we should get all this data back for that page. Now what we need to do is add the search component, okay? Because I mean, the application as it is now, it's pretty stupid because it's just these 10 songs and that's it. We want to be able to search for songs to get the lyrics from. So let's see. We're going to first just kind of build the component out, the form and all that stuff. So let's go into components and into tracks and create a new file, and we'll call it search.js. Okay, so this search.js is actually going to be a class-based component. So I'm going to use my VS Code extension and do RCC tab, and we'll keep it at search. We're just going to move the export default down to the bottom here, and we're going to export search, which is the name of the class. Okay, now this is a form, right? So it only has one field. Now, when you work with forms in React, most of the time you're going to want each field to have its own piece of state. So let's add some state here, and we're going to have track title. Okay, that's going to be the input and the name of this state. So whatever we type in. All right, and in the render, now we're gonna be using context for this, right? Because what we're doing is, let's actually go back to the finished one, is once we search here, we're gonna have a function that calls, right? We're gonna send a request to the API to search for a list of tracks that match whatever we put in here, and then we want to replace these tracks with those tracks. Okay, so we have to manipulate our global state that has the track list to have the new tracks. In order to do that, we need to basically connect the search component to the context, and we do that using a consumer, just like we did with the tracks. Okay, and like I said before, I think of it kind of like connect if you've ever used Redux. Whenever you're going to use your global state in Redux, you bring in connect. Well, when you're using the context API, you bring in a consumer from your context. Okay, we're also going to be using Axios, so I'll just get that out of the way and import that as well. Okay, and then we want to import, just like we did in tracks, we want to import consumer, and that's going to be from our context file, which we can get to by just .. and context, right? So no, we want two .. slashes. There we go. Okay, so now that we brought in the consumer, in order to do anything with it, we need to return the consumer down here. Okay, just like we did in tracks. If we look at tracks, you can see we returned consumer, and then we also had this value. Now, we're not bringing in the track list from here, but we are going to have a method in our state called dispatch to basically dispatch an action to our context. So we do, in fact, need this value. Okay, so we're going to set it up just like we did here by saying return. Why isn't my mouse working? So we're going to say return consumer. Let's say consumer, and this is going to take in, this takes in nothing. I don't know why I keep thinking it does. All right, so consumer, and then we put in our curly braces with value, and we go like that. Okay, so again, this value is going to include the entire state because that's how we set it up in context.js right here. It's going to include the entire state, and I'm going to add to that in a minute, but I just want to kind of get the search UI, the component UI showing before we do anything. So let's return here, and we're going to return a card. let's say div class card. We'll also do card body, and let's do an MB. Yeah, what was it? Margin bottom 4, and also a padding 4, P4. I don't care what anyone says. I love Bootstrap. I know that some people like to shit on it because you got to do everything custom, but classes like this, they make things so much easier. So unless your UI, your design is really, really important, I don't see why not to use Bootstrap, you know. And of course, this application looks very bootstrappy, but we could style it much differently. And I do have a Bootstrap course on Udemy where we create some themes that aren't so bootstrappy. All right, so in here, let's see, we want to have an H1. I'm going to give it the class of display-4. And we also want to center it, so text-center. And this is going to say, actually we're going to have an icon, so let's do an I tag, FAS, and then FA-music. That's our icon. Next to it, we're going to have search for a song. Okay, and then under the H1, let's put a paragraph with the class of lead, which will just make it a little more prominent, a little bigger. We also want to text center it. And in here, I'm just going to put get the lyrics for any song. Okay, so let's just save this for now. I just want to get this displaying. Now remember, this is going to go in the index component because the router, if we look at our routes, the home route points to the index component. So that's what's showing up. So let's go to index and let's bring in our search. Okay, we already brought in tracks. Let's bring in search. Okay, and then we'll go down here and we'll put the search right above the tracks. Okay, just like that. And let's see. That's not it. There it is. Okay, so at least the search is showing. We didn't put the form in yet, but that's fine. At least this is showing in the index. So let's go back to search and continue. Index should be all set, so we can close that up. So under the paragraph here, we want to put our form. We don't need an action. And in our form, let's put a form group class. And we'll have an input field here. And this is going to have a class of form control. And let's do form-control-LG for large. Okay, so that'll format it. Let's see, input type text, good. We want to put a placeholder. So placeholder, let's say song title ... I'm just gonna have prettier format this. All right, so placeholder, let's do a name. So the name is gonna be track title. Okay, and you want the name to be the same as the state for this input. So this track title should match this name. And I'll show you why in a second. A lot of you probably know. But value, we're going to set to the state. So this dot state dot track title. Okay. And then, actually, let me just show you something real quick that most of you know if you've dealt with React. But if I go and I try to type in here, I can't. Okay, it's not letting me because this is what's called a controlled component. So the state is linked to the input of this. So we need to actually have an event listener for a change event, an on change, meaning when we type in it, that fires off an on change event. And then we need to set the state to whatever is typed in here. Okay, so whenever you hit a key, that should set the state to whatever you put in, okay, or whatever is in this input. So in order to do that, we need to add an on change event, and we're going to set it to a function called this.onChange. Okay, so let's take care of this first. So we'll go up here and we'll say onChange. Now, and I explained this in my React course a little more, but if you want to, actually I'll just show you. Let's do onChange. And this will take in an event parameter. Okay, and then let's change the state. So this dot state, this dot set state. Okay, so we want to set the state, we want to set the track title, and we want to set it to the value of that's being typed in, which we can get from e.target.value. Okay, whatever we type in is going to come in as this. So we're setting the track title to whatever's typed in. So let's see what happens if we just leave it as is. Okay, so we're going to open up our console here. And don't mind that little warning right there. And if I start to type, we get can't read property set state of undefined. So what that means is that this set state, it can't read this of undefined. So it's saying this is undefined. Now, what you could do is you could bind this. You could go down here and you could say dot bind, and you can pass in this and save. And now if we go back, cannot read property value of undefined, e.target.value. What am I missing here? This dot set state, e.target.value on change. What the fuck? Track title. Oh, I misspelled target. Sorry about that. Happens, but now it works, all right? Now, if you don't want to have to do bind this for all of your inputs, all you have to do, get rid of that, and all you have to do is change this to an arrow function by simply putting equals and then an arrow. Okay, if we do that, it'll work. Okay, and it doesn't give us that error. Now, another thing that I want to change here is instead of saying track title, I mean, this works, we're setting this track title, but what if we had a bunch of input forms here? We wouldn't want to have to do a separate on change for each one and then have the name of the the state value, or the state key, I should say, here. So what we can do is just make sure that your state key for that input matches the name, like I said earlier, and then you can simply go like this. You can put in some brackets and you can say e.target.name. Okay, and what that's going to do is it's going to look at that name field. What did I mess up here? That. So it's going to look at that name field, and it's going to use that. So it'll still be track title, but it'll get it from the name. But that way, even if we had other inputs, we could still use this same on change, and it would just take whatever that name of that input is. So let's save this and go back and make sure we can still type in here. Good. And if we want to take a look at the React tools, which we haven't done in a while, let's see. So we'll go to our search component, which is in the router. It's in here, index, and search. All right, so take a look at the state. So track title is whatever is in here, and every time we type, as I delete, you can see that that state changes. Okay, so every single keystroke is changing the state of track title. Okay, so let's finish up the UI here. Whoops, and let's add the button because we haven't done that yet. So we'll go down here, and I'm sure that most of you guys that are following along probably already know this stuff about React, but just in case, for the ones that don't. So let's see, we want to add a button, which is going to go where? It's going to go under the form group. So let's say button, let's give it a couple classes, btn, btn-primary, give this thing some color. btn-lg, make it large. So large input, large button. Let's make it a block level element so it goes all the way across. And let's do an margin bottom 5. Okay, and we want to do type submit so that it actually submits the form. And then we'll say get track lyrics. And I believe that should do it. Let's take a look here. What's this? Axios is defined but never used. Oh, that's because we haven't used it yet. All right, so let's take a look. There we go. Looks good. All right, so now what we can do is start to work on typing something in and making the request to Musixmatch, which if we go to the documentation, you'll see track.search. Okay, so that's, why can't I open it? There we go. So that's what we want to work with. And you can choose different parameters to add as well. This is the endpoint, and it'll give us a track list just like the chart track that we use to get the top 10. Okay, so we just want to replace our state, our context state, or provider state, I should say, with that. Okay, so we're going to need to run that on the form submit. So we're going to need a function on our form. So let's say on submit, and then we'll say this dot form submit. Actually, let's make it more specific. Let's call it find track. Okay, because that's what we're doing, is we're finding tracks. All right. Yeah, so find track, and let's go up here and create that. So find track, and we're going to make it an arrow function. Okay, we want to just add an event parameter. Now, since it's a form submit, we want to prevent the default from happening. Okay, we don't want the form to actually submit to a file, so e.prevent_default will do that. Then we want to make our request. So I'm going to copy the request from the context. I'm just going to copy this whole thing. And let's paste that in. Okay, so the endpoint, let's see, we don't want chart.tracks. We don't want that. We want to search. So we're going to do search.track. No, what is it? Track search. You know what? Let's just get rid of everything except the API key. And then we'll just grab it from the documentation so I don't screw anything up. So right here, let's see, track.search, and then you have a query, queue artist, except we're not doing the artist, we're doing the track. So up here you can see queue track is one of the parameters, the song title. You can also search by artist. There's a lot you can do with this API. You could build a pretty extensive application, and it might be worth it to actually pay and build some kind of really cool production app. So let's see. Even though we're using queue track instead of queue artist, I'm still going to just copy this as this is. They're searching for Justin Bieber, hard-coded, so they have horrible taste in music, but that's okay. Most people do these days. So let's go ahead and paste that in right there. Okay, so we get track.search, and we want, instead of queue artist, we want queue track because we're not searching artists. And then instead of Justin Bieber, we want this to be a dynamic value. So we want to put in that syntax. Now, to get this, the track, this is actually what's in state, right? Track title. So it's whatever is in the input, whatever we type in. So all we have to do is simply say this dot state dot track title. All right, now let's see the rest of this. Page size, I want to do 10. I want 10 results. Page 1, that's fine. S track rating, descending. I think that's like how close it matches or something like that. I'm not exactly sure, but we'll keep it as is. And then that should be it. Okay, so then down here, let's get rid of that and let's just console log and see what we get. So let's see, res.data, see what that gives us. Okay, save that. And let's search for, let's actually go to our console and we'll search for the Unforgiven and get tracks. Okay, we get something back. Let's check out the message, the body, and we get an array of 10 values, and they're all the tracks that match the Unforgiven. Okay, so now is the hard part. Now is the hard part to explain, because we need to basically, like I said, replace these tracks with these 10 tracks that we're getting back from our search. So we're going to have to change the the context.js file a little bit. We're actually going to have a little reducer. So if you've used Redux before, this will look pretty familiar. If you took my React course, this will look pretty familiar. But we're going to go into context.js. Okay, and let's see, how do I want to do this? So our state, remember our state gets passed down to any consumer, which in our case is the tracks component and the search component. I want to add a value of dispatch. Okay, so dispatch is actually, we're going to set this up to be an arrow function. We're going to say action arrow, and then say this dot set state, and then we want to set state to a reducer function and then pass in the state and the action. Okay, so this is going to allow us to have a reducer where we can call this dispatch from any consumer component to manipulate the state, okay, and do what we want. In our case, we want to replace the 10 tracks with whatever we search. Okay, so now that we've done that, let's go up above. We'll go above the class of the provider class, and let's create a reducer. Okay, and this is going to be an arrow that takes in state and action. Okay, just like right here, we're just creating this method right here. So let's say state action, and then we want to set that. And just like in Redux, we're going to evaluate the action type. Okay, we're actually going to send along a type. So to do that, we'll put in a switch, and this should look very, very familiar if you know Redux and you don't know the context API. So we're going to say switch. I've been creating a Python course, so I almost just did that. So let's do switch action dot type. Okay, so the action is going to be an object with a type, and we're going to evaluate that, and we're going to say case. Okay, so if the case is search underscore tracks, oops, that's a plus sign. If the case is search tracks, then we want to return our object, and we'll use the spread operator to get whatever is in the state. But then we also want to change the track list. This is where we're actually changing the track list to be whatever is in the action.payload. Okay, the response we get back in the search component, we want to send as the payload. Okay, and then let's see, we'll also change the heading to a string of search results. We'll just hard code that. Okay, let's see, so after that, we just want to default. Default is just going to return state. What did I do wrong? I get some kind of syntax error because of that. Okay. So save. So now from our search component, we want to call this dispatch. Okay, and we want to send along an action with the type of search tracks. Okay, we also want to send along a payload, which will be the response we get, and set that to track list, and also change the heading. Okay, so I think we should be good here. And yeah, so remember, dispatch will get sent along right here, because we're sending the value is going to include the entire state, which includes that method. Why is this a different color? Did I miss something up here? State, dispatch, action. No, it should work. Should be good. Okay, so let's go back to search. So we should have access to dispatch inside of this value. In fact, why don't we do this? Why don't we console.log value and see what that gives us, okay, when the page loads. So this is what it gives us. Let's look here, and we have our track list, our initial track list, our heading, and you see our dispatch function. Okay, it's not going to tell us much. It's a function. It's not, it's not data. So we know that we have access to the dispatch. Okay, so let's go back. I can actually close up the final project here. So let's go back to our search component, and now that we know we have that dispatch available to us, where do we want to run this? Okay, we want to run this when we submit the form, because we want to submit the form, make the request, get the response, and then dispatch that back to the reducer. Okay, this reducer here, right here. So we need to pass that value, dispatch from the value into the find track function. So the way that we can do that is go down to, or I should say up to the form right here on submit, find track, and we want to pass in dispatch from this value. All right, so let's see. Yeah, let's use some destructuring here and just let's pull out dispatch from that value. Okay, I hope you guys understand what's going on here. Okay, this is coming from our global state, which has the dispatch. I'm pulling the dispatch out from the value, and then I want to pass it into the form find track function so that we can use it. So to pass it in, we're going to say .bind. We're going to pass in this first and then dispatch. Okay, and then up here for find track, we want to pass in dispatch as our first parameter and then the event. Wrap parentheses around that, and now we should actually have access to the dispatch function inside of find track. Okay, so now when we get our result, I don't want to console log it. What I want to do is call dispatch, and dispatch is going to take in an object, which, as I said, is going to have a type of search underscore tracks, and it has to have a payload, and that payload is going to be that response. Okay, it's not going to just be res.data, but we want the actual tracks, which is going to be in message.body.track underscore list. Okay, so that's the payload we're sending to the reducer in the context. Okay, so once we submit the form, it should get our response from Musixmatch, get the 10 tracks, and send that as a payload. Okay, and that should be received right here. And then we're setting the track list, which is the track list in the global state right here, to the new tracks that have been searched. We're also changing the heading to search results. All right, so hopefully that works. I think I got everything, so we'll give it a shot. So let's go ahead and say the Unforgiven and get tracks, and there we go, it works. All right, cool. So, one thing I want to do is clear this out after we search. So we'll just kind of reset the state. So if we go to search.js And let's see, so find track, we make our request, we'll make our dispatch, and then let's go down here and let's say this dot set state, and we'll set the we'll set the track title to nothing. All right, see if that works. So the Unforgiven. All right, so that clears out. Good. Search for something else. We'll search for Thunder. Okay, we get Imagine Dragons, AC/DC, some other people I never heard of. If we click View Lyrics, it should take us to the lyrics page, which today is just taking much longer. And there we go. All right, guys, so our application is complete. I hope you liked this series and this little project. As far as deployment, just like any other React app, maybe GitHub Pages. I think I'm actually going to do a tutorial on GitHub Pages because it's a service that's just so easy to use to host front-end websites and applications. And a lot of people don't know how to use it. And there's actually a command line tool called GH Pages that makes it really easy. But that's it, guys. Hopefully you liked it. If you did, please leave a like, and I will see you next time.